Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition, the home office solo edition of Just Sports on Thursday night, November 13th, 2025. We're just a couple of weeks away from Thanksgiving now. So thanks for tuning in tonight. Got a few things to talk about. And as always, if you'd like to call us, or to call me, I should say, you can give me a call at 860 605 7622 860-605-7622. But I have like to open the show tonight with a funny thing happened on the way to the end of the high school sports season. Of course, it's state tournament time for most of the fall sports, with the exception of football. But on the way to the conclusion of that season, the GNH football team came up with their biggest victory in a couple of years this past Saturday night down at Waterbury's Municipal Stadium, where they defeated Waterbury Career Academy 16-12 in a outstanding effort both offensively and defensively. And I'll tell you a little bit more about the details of that game, but it was a tremendous game. As I said, probably the best one they've played in a couple of years. It was also their third consecutive victory. So after starting the season 1-4 and then going into their bye week, out of the bye week, they've won these three games in a row. And they're now at 4-4. And they've just kind of cracked open the door just a little bit towards possibly making the CIAC Class SS playoffs. A lot would have to happen right for them, including winning their final two games of the season. This Saturday's game is Senior Day. We'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. And the opponent is Holy Cross out of Waterbury. But and then the Thanksgiving week game, which will be against St. Paul. But if they can somehow finish this off by winning the final two games and then getting some help, and I'd probably have to say a lot of help, they might just be able to sneak into that final eighth position in the CIAC Class SS playoffs. In case you're not familiar with how the playoffs work in Connecticut high school football, there are six divisions based on enrollment size, and the top eight teams in each division qualify for the playoffs. So there will be an opening round game, and then a semifinal round game, and then a state championship game. So you'd have to win three games to win a state title. But that's looking more and more like a possibility for GNH. But we'll talk about some of those possibilities and what has to happen for them in just a few moments. But before we move too much into detail about the game that happened last Saturday night, we do want to thank Patsy DeMauro, who's off in Las Vegas this week, and he was there for the broadcast of the game last Saturday, along with our cameraman Tim Wheeler. So, of course, we always want to thank them for their help. And Patsy will be back with us next week, and we'll be back on the air again next Thursday night. Next Thursday, we'll be at the Gilbert School studio. And then it'll just be a week before the Thanksgiving festivities. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as the night goes along here. I'll stay on the air for somewhere between 30 and 45 minutes, unless we get a lot of calls. And then, in which case, I can stay on a little bit longer. But just a fantastic game. I don't really even know where to begin, because there were so many places that you could begin. The first was that Waterbury Career Academy was ranked fourth in the Class M playoff points structure going into that game with a record of 6-1. They had only suffered their first loss of the season the prior week against Holy Cross in a tight one, 19-15. But then Waterbury Career Academy, just GNH threw a monkey wrench into their playoff plans. It did drop them a little bit in the rankings. It only dropped them down to 6, but I say it's a monkey wrench because this week Waterbury Career Academy has to take on 8-0 Seymour. So that could be a challenge for them. And if they should lose a third game, that might knock them out of the playoffs. Most likely, Waterbury Career will win their Thanksgiving week matchup against Wilby, who only has one win on the season. So, it was a tough sledding for the Spartans from Waterbury, who were riding high for the season because, again, remember that they had made the playoffs last year and they were looking to cement their second consecutive playoff appearance. But again, GNH had other ideas. And the game started off a little rough for GNH as the Spartans scored on their first possession of the game to go up 6-0 in the first period. But then really the Yellow Jacket defense just stiffened and didn't allow much the rest of the game. And they played tremendous, probably their best overall effort of the season on defense. Um, Owen Reamer had 2 interceptions, including a game-sealing one on the Spartans' final drive, and there was also a key sack by Jaden Hoffman on the second to the last play that's put the Spartans in a pretty big hole. And then it was on the final play of the game for the Spartans. The Reamer came up with the interception, and then GNH got the ball back with about 5-6 minutes to go in the game, looking to either add some more points or simply run out the clock. And that's exactly what they did. They chewed up the remainder of the clock, and it was punctuated by a key 4th and 9 conversion, and it just sent the fans that had made the trip down to Municipal Stadium into a frenzy when that happened, because then literally it was just a kneel down for the final play of the game, and it was just a fantastic victory. Coach Salis and his staff are to be commended for getting the kids ready to play. They've made tremendous strides this season, especially coming out of their bye week. And they really have played 3 very, very good games. They beat Wolcott on homecoming with the Billy Richmond game, and then the following week up at Housatonic, they beat up on Watertown, and then last week they really had played their best overall game of the year, beating Waterbury Career Academy 16-12. So a couple of the highlights from this game. One is that uh, let's see if I can read my notes here. Cole Lennon had his second consecutive 100-yard rushing effort on the ground, and he's the one who had a big run on that final GNH possession that put him down into deep into Spartan territory. And then, even though GNH got pushed back a little bit after that, uh, on 4th and 9, where they were really looking just to run out the clock because there was only about 15 seconds left in the game. They were looking just not necessarily just to convert, but to just chew up as much of those precious seconds off the clock. And on a sweep to the right, Owen Reamer, who was looking like he was just trying to bide his time, finally found an opening, and he got 10 yards on 4th and 9. So the final play was just a kneel down deep inside the Spartan territory, and that sealed the victory for the Yellow Jackets. So they do even their record at 4-4. And of course, I think the key point in the game was just before halftime. As I said earlier, that the Yellow Jacket defense had stiffened after giving up the touchdown on the opening drive of the game for the Spartans. And just before halftime, the Yellow Jacket offense got the ball back thanks to their defense, and they were mounting a drive, and they got to about the 12-yard line with only 7 or 8 seconds left in the half, and they threw a pass into the end zone. Quarterback Trevor Campbell threw a perfect ball to a diving Eston Ryan in the back corner of the end zone. Eston was being hounded by the Spartan defensive back, and he dove for the ball and got his hands underneath it just before the ball hit the turf, and he hauled it in, kept possession for the touchdown. Then he, of course, added the extra point. So GNH went into the locker room at halftime with all the momentum, and they had just gotten the lead for the first time, 7-6. And then coming out of the locker room, it looked like the Spartans were they tried to change up their attack. They tried mostly running the ball in the first half, and then they decided to change to more of an air attack in that second half. But the GN defense, the defensive line, the defensive backs, just put on a clinic covering the receivers and getting a lot of pressure on Ethan Blaze, the Spartan quarterback, and it just turned into a sparkling defensive effort. And then they did tack on an Eston Ryan field goal to make the advantage 10-6 heading into the fourth quarter, when all of a sudden the Spartan offense did come alive. They threw a whale of a pass from Blaze to one of the Spartan wide receivers, who hauled it in despite immense, terrific coverage by the Yellow Jacket defensive back, spun away from a tackle and then raced 30 yards into the end zone to give the Spartans back the lead 12-10, as they attempted to go for two, but they didn't make it. So the score remained 12-10. And that's how it was for the majority of that fourth period. But then GNH did get the ball back at about 9 or 10 minutes left in that fourth period, and they went on a very time-consuming march, and they capped it off with a touchdown run, and they regained the lead 16-12. But yet the Spartans had one more opportunity on offense, and just that sequence of plays that I talked about a little earlier, where they got into GNH territory about the 35 or 40-yard line, but then Jaden Hoffman came up with a key sack, dropping the quarterback for about a 15-yard loss, and made it fourth down and about 20. They attempted a pass downfield, and Owen Reamer came up with the interception to kind of seal it, but there was still time on the clock, so the game wasn't over at that point. GNH needed to, at minimum, chew up clock and pick up a couple of first downs. And on the first or second play of that drive after the interception, Cole Lennon ripped off about a 40-yard run down to around the 30-yard line of the Spartans. And from there, GNH just kept running the ball, running the ball. They did have a penalty that knocked them back. And then they finally got into a 4th down and 9 situation. But by that time, there was only about 12 or 13, maybe 14 seconds left in the game. And they instead of punting or risking some type of kick or a field goal that could have been blocked and returned, they decided just to go for it. And as I said, Owen Reamer, big play, just used his patience. His blockers did a great job creating just a little bit of a seam for him on that right side, and he picked up 10 or 11 yards on 4th and 9, and that set off the celebration for the Yellow Jackets. And the bus ride home to Winston up Route 8 was certainly a very, very happy one, as it did even their record at 4-4, and literally just opened up the door just a little bit to see if they could possibly now work their way into the CIAC Class SS playoff picture. They currently sit in 12th. And as I mentioned before, that the top 8 teams in each class do make it. So a lot has to happen for them to go in their favor to get into that 8th position, including, of course, winning their final 2 games. This Saturday's game will be up at Van Wy Field. It's a 1 o'clock kickoff. It is senior day, and it's a big day for the program because there are 19 senior football players and 10 senior cheerleaders. So there's a, a ceremony that's actually going to start at noon to make sure that every one of those players and cheerleaders are honored. And so if you're coming out to the game, make sure you get there early. So even though kickoff is at 1, you want to be there early for the senior day ceremony. We will be there to cover it for Just Sports Winstead. We will film the senior day ceremony as well as the game, and then we'll post those up to the Just Sports Winstead YouTube channel, just as all the previous games are now out on our YouTube channel site, and you can go and see all the previous games if you've missed any of them so far. But I just checked the stats on that. We've had about 100 views for each of the last couple of games, so that's a nice nice round number for us. And if you can't get out to Van Wy Field this Saturday, you will be able to check it out later in the weekend on Just Sports Winstead YouTube channel. But you know, We also need to give credit to the offensive line for the Yellow Jackets. They did a fantastic job just opening holes all night for the running backs and providing protection for Trevor Campbell, the young sophomore quarterback who's playing with much more confidence as the season has gone on. I thought he played his best game of the season as well. And, hopefully they can keep it going for at least two more games here and see if they can just sneak into those playoffs. Of course, last year was not a playoff season for GNH, but the prior three seasons were. And so if they could sneak in and make it 4 out of 5 seasons, that's just a feather in the cap of the players and the coaching staff at GNH. Coach Salas and his staff do a fantastic job, and it'd be nice if they could see if they could get another playoff game under their belt. But the Class Double S division this year, especially, is a tough one to get into. So, they'll have to have a few things go right for them before that. So let's take a look at the standings in Class Double S. I'm just going to bring those up here on my phone. Just bear with me for a minute while I do that. So in Class Double S, currently the number one team is Killingly, who's 8-0. And then a team that's somewhat familiar to people in the local area are the Nonawog Chiefs. It's a newly reconstituted co-op program that used to be called Northwest United, but since Nonawog had essentially become too big for that co-op had to break up last year, and they had actually qualified for the playoffs the last 2 years. So it looks like they are going to qualify again. They're currently 7-0, but and it looks like they can win at least two, if not three, of the remaining games. So they will be in the playoffs. Daniel Hand out of Madison is 7-1. They are ranked third. Jonathan Law is ranked fourth. They're out of Milford. Number 5, Ellington, an old Pequot Conference foe, is currently ranked fifth. The sixth team is Ledyard out of the Eastern Connecticut Conference. New Fairfield is currently sitting in seventh out of the Southwest Conference. And then Waterford, also out of the Eastern Connecticut Conference, is currently in eighth position. In the teams that are ahead of GNH in ninth, 10th, and 11th are the Creek Colts, who have a nice season going. They're 5-3. They're out of the Hartford area. Plainville is ranked number 10. They're 5-3. That was the opening day game this year for GNH, and Plainville had the best of them that day, winning 46-7. They are sitting at 5-3. And then Granby Canton is in 11th at 5-3 as well. GNH scrimmage Granby Canton was sort of the final tune-up before the regular season kicked off. So, there's a possibility. Now GNH would have to hope that those teams would falter, at least in one of their remaining games, and GNH would have to win their final two to perhaps sneak in at 6-4. And then also Joel Barlow is very close. They're in 13th place. They're 4-4. And then they're out of the Southwest Conference, and Rocky Hill is 4-4 out of the Central Connecticut Conference. So a lot could happen, and you never know. Sometimes these final 2 weeks of the high school football season yield some surprising results. So let's hope they go in GNH's favor and they can uh, get back to the playoffs once again this year. But in any event, come on out this Saturday against Holy Cross for Senior Day. And you won't be disappointed. It looks like the weather is supposed to be pretty good, just a little bit on the chilly side. But of course, it is mid-November, so that's expected. And the senior day ceremony is always a touching thing in honoring the players and cheerleaders who've given many of them all 4 years of their high school career to the program. So it's always a nice thing where they're escorted out onto the field by their family members, and always an emotional day. And again, the opponent that day will be Holy Cross, who has its own playoff concerns. They are in Class M, one class above Class Double S, and they currently sit in ninth position at 5-3. So they need to win their final two games and get a little bit of help at least to sneak into the top 8 in Class M. So We'll see how that goes there. So you could almost think of this as almost a de facto playoff game because really both teams need this for their playoff lives. Holy Cross, as I said a few moments ago, had actually beaten Waterbury Career Academy the prior week by a score of 19-15, so a 4-point margin. Same thing that GNH had beaten Waterbury Career Academy 16-12. So could be a very entertaining and highly competitive game. So we'll come on out to Van Wy Field and you know cheer on the local lads and the young ladies who are cheering them on, and you won't be disappointed. So one of the other things I wanted to talk about tonight was that the high school state tournament season is winding down now for all of the other sports. For instance, volleyball, boys and girls soccer, field hockey. Those championship games will be held this coming weekend. Their tournament started about 10 days ago. They've worked their way through the various rounds, and now the state finals will be this weekend in all of those sports. If you are interested in the soccer finals, they will take place at the old Dillon Stadium, which is now called Trinity Health Stadium in Hartford. And they play all 8 state championship games there over the course of 2 days on Saturday and Sunday. And then the field hockey finals will be played. There's 3 classes in field hockey, and those will be played at Weathersfield High. And then for the volleyball state finals, they'll be played at a couple of different sites this weekend. But as far as local teams, there are a few local teams that made pretty good runs in their respective state tournaments. So, for instance, the Northwestern Regional 7 girls volleyball team, they made it to the quarterfinals before they were knocked out by Sacred Heart, who was from Hamden. They had won their first 2 round games. They beat Notre Dame Prep out of Fairfield and then Foreign out of Milford. And then they did, as I said, get knocked off by Sacred Heart Academy of Hamden in the quarterfinal round. The Housatonic girls soccer team, they were they made it to the Class S semifinal round where they just lost the other day to Morgan. Morgan is from the shoreline from Clinton and that down in that area. And so they had a fantastic season, making it all the way to the semifinal round. We had mentioned last week that the Northwestern Regional 7 boys soccer team had made it to the quarterfinal round this year before they got knocked out by Haddam Killingworth, who has now advanced to the finals this weekend. And so it's second straight good run by Coach Andy Campbell's soccer Charges, as they were in the Class S final last year. This year they made it to the quarterfinal round. So good job by the Northwestern boys soccer team. And of course, the girls soccer team from Northwestern, they did win their opening round game as a number 28 seed. They beat Wilcox Tech, but then they lost in their second round to Northwest Catholic out of the Central Connecticut Conference. And Northwest Catholic has also advanced to their state final in class M as well. So it's always, if you're going to lose, if you're going to lose to a potential state champion, it maybe takes the sting away just a little bit. And then Chippewa, their field hockey team, lost in the semifinals to Granby in overtime. Granby, I just read today, was making their 24th appearance in a state championship game for field hockey. That's quite a program and quite a tradition. But the Chippewa field hockey team had a great season. They won Class S last year, and this year they advanced to the semifinal round. Couldn't quite get back to the finals. And then the Chippewa boys soccer team, they made it to the quarterfinal round where they also lost to the Morgan School in a shootout. When I say shootout, I mean it was a high scoring game, 5-4. So Chippewa had a strong season once again for the boys soccer team on the pitch. But always nice to recognize the local teams, seeing that they had some success in both their league play and then their state tournament play. But so that's it for the local sports scene. So really, at this point, the only team remaining will be GNH to seeing if they can extend their season. And then, of course, we should also mention that Torrington High's football team, we don't talk about them too often, other than the fact that they had played GNH and beaten them pretty soundly in the game just before the bye week. They look like they have an excellent chance to win to get into the Class Double M playoffs. They are currently at 6-2, and they were taking on Naugatuck this weekend, and then they will take on Watertown in their Thanksgiving morning game. And so, at minimum, they should finish 7-3, and 7-3 should get them into their playoff class. So we'll see how Torrington does. They were a playoff team last year as well, so looking for their second consecutive appearance in the playoffs. It's always nice when you can string together playoff appearances, because in football it is the hardest sport in which to qualify for the playoffs in Connecticut, because they only take the top 8, whereas in most of the other sports you only have to simply win 40% of your regular season games to get into the playoffs. So we'll see how that goes. Still a couple of weeks left in this high school football season, and then of course, then the playoffs will begin, and those will wrap up with state championship games at both Rentschler Field and Central Connecticut State University on the middle weekend of December. So if you have anything that you wanted to talk about, or if you wanted to go through anything, or talk about anything in the world of sports, you're welcome to do that. 860-605-7622. I've been talking here for about a half an hour. So if you'd like to get on the line and have a conversation about anything that you are interested in the world of sports, whether it be local sports or whether it be national professional sports, or even our local Yukon college athletics, because there's a lot to talk about there as well. So while we wait for a call, if you have a question about anything, certainly I'll repeat the number one more time: 860-605-7622. Now, of course, the big news locally in the world of the NFL was that the Giants lost another heartbreaker over the weekend to the Chicago Bears. And during the game, they lost their rookie phenom quarterback, Jackson Dart, to a concussion. And the defense blew a late lead once again for the fourth time this season. And ultimately, that cost Coach Brian Daboll his job, as he was fired on Monday. And it was his fourth season at the helm of the Giants. And of course, he surprised everyone in his rookie campaign, getting what was thought to be a very weak Giant team into the playoffs, and actually won a playoff game that season. But then the next 2 seasons did not go very well. And it was, they only won 6 games and then 4 games last year. And so far, the record now is 2-8, and that was just enough for I should say, owner John Mara. He had had enough and decided that a change was necessary, and so he was relieved of his duties on Monday. So they did elevate offensive coordinator Mike Kafka to interim head coach, and we'll see if that helps at all. And then they also announced one other change, is that since Jackson Dart is still in the concussion protocol, he will not be eligible or able to play this weekend. So they've elevated Jameis Winston from the third quarterback to the starting quarterback for this week. And of course, any of you guys who follow the NFL probably know that Jameis is bound to bring some excitement to the game, whether it's for your team or the team he's playing for, or the other team. That's always to be debated, or just to be seen. So we'll see what Jameis can do. He is an exciting performer. He's had some phenomenal games in his career. He started over 80 games in his NFL career. He was the number 1 draft pick in the draft back in, I believe the year was 2015. And he has a very strong arm. He's got a lot of experience, and he's been known to rack up some impressive throwing numbers as far as number of yards thrown for and touchdowns. But also on the downside, he's been known to throw a pick 6 or 2. He's known to give the ball to the other team quite often as well. So whichever way you slice it, it should be an exciting game as the Green Bay Packers, coming off their Monday Night Football loss to the Eagles, come to the Giants Stadium this Sunday, and they will take on the Giants and see if the Giants can spring the upset here. Obviously, the Packers, with a record of 5-3-1, are fighting for a playoff berth, and a loss there would be damaging to their hopes. So let's see if the Giants can play spoiler here now that their playoff aspirations have kind of gone down the drain for this year, and see if they can play spoiler against the Packers. So the other news is that tonight, in local NFL action, is that the Jets are playing the Patriots, and the surprising Patriots at that, with a record of 8-2, leading the AFC East, because Drake May, their young quarterback, and of course their new coach Mike Vrabel, have really done a great job this year for the Patriots, turning things around. Last year, the Patriots only won a handful of games, and so this year they are currently leading the AFC East and could be vying for the number one seed in the AFC. So we'll see how tonight's game go, and even the Jets, who started the season 0-7 with their new coach Aaron Glenn, now they're on a two-game winning streak. They beat the Cleveland Browns last weekend, 27-20, in a kind of an unusual game, and that they had a kickoff return for a touchdown and a punt return for a touchdown, and they won a game despite their quarterback Justin Fields throwing for only 54 yards in the game. That is an anomaly in today's NFL, if you can win a game when your quarterback only throws for 54 yards. So we'll see what happens tonight. That game's on Amazon Prime, so if you get Prime, you'll be able to tune in at 8:15 for the kickoff. I don't remember if that game's in New Jersey or up in New England, but in either case, it should be an exciting contest because those two are old rivals, and sometimes it's one of those games where you can kind of throw out the records. So even though the Jets are 2-7 and the Patriots are 8-2, and you think, oh, this is going to be an easy Patriot victory. Not always the case. Sometimes the Jets can give the Patriots a battle. So we'll see how that one ends up here tonight. But some other NFL news from this week is that it looks like Joe Burrow is going to try to work his way back from injured reserve. He had that turf toe injury that he had to have surgery on just a few weeks into the season, and it looked like he might not make it back till the middle of December. But now his practice window has been opened, and he is saying that he would like to be back for the Bengals game that happens the week of Thanksgiving. So we'll see if he can do that, because the Bengals, um, now being led by Joe Flacco, um, they've won a couple of games. They've lost a couple that their defense gave up leads as well, including one to the Jets that gave the Jets their first victory of the season. But they're still hanging around in the playoff race because that AFC North is only being led now by the Pittsburgh Steelers at 5-4, and now the Baltimore Ravens, they've come kind of off the mat because they started off 1-4 or 1-5, and now they're back to 4-5. So and Lamar seems to be playing much better, and their defense seems to be playing much better. So they're only a game behind the Steelers, and the Bengals are just a game back of them, I believe. And then of course the Browns at 2-7 are kind of bringing up the rear in that division, but that division is still wide open. So we'll see what happens there. And then on the NFC side of things, the Eagles now are at 7-2 after their defensive struggle of a victory in Green Bay on Monday Night Football. They won the game 10-7, and their defense is playing quite well. And their offense still hasn't really quite got untracked fully this year compared to what it was last year, but their defense has improved quite a bit in the last few weeks, and they are currently the number one seed, along with the Seattle Seahawks and the Los Angeles Rams. They're all 7-2. So we'll see what happens on the NFC side of things as we're just past the halfway point of the NFL season. In addition, We just had the announcements last night in Major League Baseball. Of course, the Dodgers had that comeback victory in the World Series over the Blue Jays just about 10 days ago. And now they're starting to announce all of the postseason awards for Major League Baseball. Last night, they announced the Cy Young Award winners, and it was Paul Skeens of the Pittsburgh Pirates in the National League. He won his first Cy Young Award. And then Tarek Skubal of the Detroit Tigers won his second consecutive Cy Young Award. So congratulations to both of them. And then tonight will be the announcement of the MVPs. And let's see if they've announced them yet. I'm not sure what time they were being announced, but it's just after 8 o'clock. So let's take a look on the phone and see if we can get an update on that. Just give me a moment while my phone loads. Okay.